so far done a terrific job. I mean, they're prepared. We don't know exactly where it's going to be landing, where landfall will be, but we think we're as well prepared as you can possibly be. Many of the folks have left Texas, obviously on an emergency basis, and come down to Florida. Puerto Rico escaped. It could have been far worse. They really escaped the brunt, but it's heading right now, right directly into Florida. So hopefully it'll take a turn, go east and do it quickly. Right now it's not doing that. We are with the people of Florida, and as you know, the Virgin Islands got hit very hard, very, very hard. We're finding out the kind of damage. It's actually, communication is actually difficult. We have people right now on the Virgin Islands, and we'll see how that is, but it's been hit very, very hard. I can say this, Florida is as well prepared as you can be for something like this. Now it's just a question of what happens. It's the largest hurricane they've ever seen coming out of the Atlantic, and the winds are the strongest, most importantly. This is the real problem. The winds are the strongest that they've ever seen in a hurricane coming from that region. So we're with everybody in Florida. We're working very hard. We have tremendous talent and really tremendously brave people to be there. And hopefully it's going to work out all right. We'll see over the next few hours.
How fearful are you about
Are you concerned, Mr. President, that FEMA may be spread too thin right now?
Well, FEMA is doing an incredible job, as you all know. I mean, you've been reporting it. You've seen how incredible they are. And there's a great bravery to what they're doing. But certainly we're being hit with a lot of hurricanes. We've never had a thing like this where you get hit with Harvey, which was about as bad as it gets, certainly from the standpoint of a water dump. And then you get hit with Irma. And there's one right behind Irma. I guess you probably know, a smaller one, but nevertheless right behind. I think FEMA's been, I don't think anybody has done anything like they've done at FEMA, and they have done a really good job. You see what happened in Texas, and you see already in terms of what's going on in Florida. I have to also give a special shout out to the Coast Guard. The United States Coast Guard saved 14,000 lives
for foodies
in Texas. 14,000 lives. And now I think the number's even higher than that. These people, and they go right into the eye of the storm. You know what's been happening. Most of you have been reporting. The number is astronomical. I mean, what could have been a total catastrophe in terms of life has been obviously much less. So I just want to say that the Coast Guard of our country has really performed incredibly. I've never seen anything like it. I've gotten to meet them. I've gotten to meet a lot of the folks when I was in Texas, and these are tremendous people. They are now shifting a lot of their effort to Florida, right in the middle of it. The difference, again, being these winds are tremendous. They have never seen winds like this coming off the ocean. So hopefully it's going to not hit Florida very directly, but it looks like it's going to be hitting it. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Cooler water, but then the turn back toward the west is expected again. So everyone's still in play here. This is going to hit somewhere as a major Category 3, 4, or 5 hurricane. The models, as you asked me about them, only one really back through here, and that's the UK Met model, United Kingdom model, the European model right through downtown Miami, which would be absolutely worst case with 140 or 50 mile per hour storm surge 20 feet, splashing into all the cities from Coral Gables right on up to Miami, maybe even to Fort Lauderdale. But then the United States models, a little bit farther off the coast, slightly more into the Bahamas, which of course we don't want for the Bahamas, but slightly farther off the coast. If we could get that 30 miles from the Bahamas, 30 miles from the U.S. coast, there'd be a significant slowing down of property damage until you get up to here. So it depends where you are, depends what you're rooting for. If you are evacuating today, the gas situation is not going well in some spots. Please don't let your car get below half a tank before you start looking again. You don't want to be out of gas, and then so is the station you're trying to get gas at, because then you're stuck.
Chad, the difference between the European and the U.S. models, what is it exactly? And anything to slow this storm down before it gets to the Florida coast?
You know, we talked about this the other day. If the storm actually did take a little track here, here's the European model, over the coast of Cuba, that would take some speed out of the storm because the storm wants to be over water to gain strength or to maintain strength. So the storm would slow down if it was over Cuba, slow down in speed, wind speed, maybe 120 compared to 140 or 150 right here. Now, that would certainly devastate the northern coast of Cuba. That's the only thing that's going to slow the wind speed down from the storm. This water here is 86 or 87 degrees right through here. This is just high-octane fuel for the storm to continue to grow. And the storm is rolling over islands here that are 8 or 10 feet tall.
Fall is for fireworks.
Not going to slow the storm down like running over Cuba. It's just going to overwash those islands. Some of these Turks and Caicos will be completely overwashed. They're 8 feet tall. The waves are going to be 20.
Enjoy
you can't get the idea of what's going to happen there.
Disney
People
World
are off
Resort.
those islands. They are evacuated from there.
Look, it's holding steady with 180-mile-per-hour winds. Now, there are some things we're very confident of, other things not as confident. All right, we're confident Irma is going to continue to the west-northwest. We're also confident that this front, you see right there, is going to deflect it to the north. We are not confident how much. Now, that's key, because if you zoom in tight on this storm, it is so much about where the eye of the storm goes. See this little bright yellow color in there? Those are the peak winds. They only extend 15 miles, 15 miles from the eye. That's where you find the 180-mile-per-hour winds. So if you take a look at the track of the storm, the National Hurricane Center says, all right, here it comes to the west-northwest. Then they say, yep, it's making that turn to the north. But where? Anywhere in this shaded area is a possibility. If the European model is right, and they are forecasting the worst situation for Miami, they see a landfall with the eye right on shore. That puts what would be 140-mile-per-hour winds right on shore. If they're off by, say, 20 miles, it keeps the big winds offshore. Yes, hurricane force onshore, but 75 or greater, not 140 at that point in time. If they're 50 miles off, it keeps all of the hurricane force winds offshore, and we'd have tropical storm force winds onshore. Again, a lot of speculation here. We keep an eye on this one closely. Charlie?
Thanks, Lonnie.
Probably here in the next couple of hours, and then into some very warm water near the Bahamas, and that's why they're evacuating those Bahama Islands. And here is the latest cone. I'll get a new cone in about 55 minutes or so, but the cone still has landfall in South Florida. And this is the problem. There's still a chance that it goes on this side of the cone, probably 5% over here. There's still a 5% chance that it's on this side of the cone. But there is at least a 60% chance that we're somewhere in the middle. And the middle ends up being South Florida, Miami-Dade, and the like. Here are the computer models. We talk about them all the time. Just to the east of Miami for the American model, and the European model right over Isla Morada. Here is how the European model and the GFS, the American model, differ. Here's what they look like now, all the way to Saturday, overnight Saturday, almost Sunday morning, coming straight into Key Largo, Ocean Reef, into Biscayne Bay. This is worst case scenario. Without a doubt, there is no such thing as a worst case scenario than this, except possibly slamming straight into Miami proper. There's the storm right there. We're going to have so much storm surge water pouring into Miami, pouring into Biscayne Bay, pouring into Fort Lauderdale and all the like. There could be 20 feet of surge. If your house is less than 20 feet above sea level, it's going to be wet. And now we change you and moving on up toward West Palm. Not a lot better for you. Still that storm onshore, pounding wind, 140 miles per hour, tearing up the entire coastline and all the houses. A 140 mile per hour storm is like an EF3 or 2.5 tornado that sits over your house for 30 or 40 minutes. So that's what you have to think about. That's how strong these winds are, plus the surge as well. Now the American model. Kind of a little bit happier here, somewhere in between the Bahamas. If we could keep it right here, not hitting the Bahamas and not truly striking the East Coast, now we would have winds of 100, but not 140, not 150. As the storm continues to the north, to the West Palm Beach area, it's not slowing down because it hasn't hit land. It's still 140. And then it makes aim somewhere near the coast of Georgia, South Carolina, or North Carolina as still a Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane. That's the rub with this storm, is that there's nothing that we can do to make it hit nothing. This is so big, we're going to get damage somewhere. Now, I just want you to notice, and I don't know if this is true or whether it's just slightly a wobble, but if you look at the last couple of frames, right there, the storm has turned to the north just a little bit. That was not in the forecast. We'll see if this is a meaningful change or just a little wobble and it goes back on its path. We'll know probably in an hour or two to see what this is really going to do, to see if it does change path a little bit, which would make all the forecasts difference. About 11 o'clock, we'll know.
Look, it's holding steady with a tight on this storm. It is so much about where the eye of the storm goes. See this little bright yellow color in there? Those are the peak winds. They only extend 15 miles, 15 miles from the eye. That's where you find the 180 mile per hour winds. So if you take a look at the track of the storm, the National Hurricane Center says, all right, here it comes to the west-northwest. Then they say, yep, it's making that turn to the north. But where? Anywhere in this shaded area is a possibility. If the European model is right, and they are forecasting the worst situation for Miami, they see a landfall with the eye right on shore. That puts what would be 140 mile per hour winds right on shore. If they're off by, say, 20 miles, it keeps the big winds offshore. Yes, hurricane force onshore, but 75 or greater, not 140 at that point in time. If they're 50 miles off, it keeps all of the hurricane force winds offshore, and we'd have tropical storm force winds onshore. Again, a lot of speculation here. We keep an eye on this one closely. Charlie?
Thanks, Lonnie.
So, Chad, what is the latest? Where is she headed?
Hurricane watch now for South Florida. Just issued at the 11 o'clock advisory. All the way from Jupiter, all the way around the bottom, all the way through the Keys, and back up the other side to almost Cape Coral. Not quite, but you get the idea. That whole southern half, really, or southern quarter of Florida now under a hurricane watch will eventually get upgraded to hurricane warning as the storm gets closer. It's 175 miles per hour. Last update was 180. Okay, if you can tell the difference, that's great. It's still a very deadly hurricane category 5. We're way above that, even 20 miles an hour above that. There you go, all the way here across parts, and also including Lake Okeechobee too, because the wind will be very strong there in the coming days as we roll this right on up into Florida and possibly into the Carolinas. There was a slight wobble to the right in the past hour or so. We'll see if that goes back to the left or not, or is that a meaningful trend? If we hope so, not really for the Bahamas, but hope that it gets through some of these Bahama Islands and misses everything. That is right now not the forecast. Here is the Category 5 running through between Cuba and the Grand Bahama Island and then right into South Florida. This honestly couldn't be a worse place for it to hit Florida. It'll take a huge storm surge into Biscayne Bay and up into Florida, possibly all the way up to Jupiter Inlet with huge surges, slightly offshore and then slamming again into the U.S. just to the north of Jacksonville. That's the middle of the cone. Remember now, the western part of the cone, almost out of Tampa and certainly still in the Atlantic Ocean, but the cone getting smaller because the storm is getting closer. That's just how it works out for us here. There's the cone. And here are the models we've been talking about. The United Kingdom model still back out to the west. The UK model compared to the Euro model. Boy, it sure looks like the United States, the National Hurricane Center, believing the Euro slightly more than the American models, which are out here in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, there are other things that they're looking at, too. There are ensemble models. They add them all up and divide by the number of models, and they've come up with where we see this storm now. Here's what the European model looks like over the next couple of days. It runs right north of Key Largo through Ocean Reef and then on up into Homestead, into Cutler, and as far north as you can imagine, just tearing things up at 150 miles per hour. Now, the American model, much better. I know it's only 40 miles, but if you push this offshore, you don't get 150 really on shore. You get 130. You say, well, what's the difference? Well, there is a difference between the damage at 150 and the breaking news.
Hurricane Irma, what you need to know, one of the most powerful Atlantic storms in history, and it's heading for Florida. Moments ago, the president expressed confidence in the state's preparations.
We're very concerned. We are working very hard. We have tremendous groups of talented people there. We think we're as well prepared as you can possibly be.
Right now, Hurricane Irma is ripping through the northern Caribbean, hitting island after island and leaving at least 6 people dead. Most of those deaths are in St. Martin. Here you can see some of the damage. It's enormous. Homes and businesses flattened by the immense power of Hurricane
60 miles per hour right here because it never hit any land. And where's it going? Into the Carolinas, Georgia, somewhere up there. It's going to turn left eventually. So yes, someone gets hit. Is it here, 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 or possibly there? I'm not sure exactly where worst case scenario is. There's tens of billions of dollars in damage no matter where it hits. You just have to take precautions, compare where you are. Here's the European model. Where does it go? Right through and north of Key Largo, right into Key Biscayne. There's a wild bird sanctuary right there, national park right there, up through Fort Lauderdale, West Palm, and finally offshore, doing damage with 140 mile per hour winds here. That's an EF 3 or almost 4 tornado on the ground for hours. That's 40 miles wide. I mean, think of the damage that would do in Oklahoma. Think of what it would do in downtowns like all those from Fort Lauderdale all the way northward, including Miami as well. There's the American model, slightly offshore, slightly better, tens of billions of dollars, less damage, and also the potential for a less loss of life. But, Wolf, I don't understand when you tell people to mandatorily evacuate, that doesn't mean anything to them.
I don't understand that either. But here's the question. Why the difference between the European model, which projects a direct hit on Miami and Fort Lauderdale going up to Palm Beach County, as opposed to the U.S. model, and which one has a better track record?
It's hard to answer that question. The European model is a four-dimensional model, means it moves its data points ahead in time four-dimensionally. So it's time, space, it's up, down, east, west, north, south, vertical, and time. The U.S. model only does the three. They take all the same time. The model runs at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. That's it, period. They don't care about anything else. So it's a little bit of a difference how they put it in there. But I'm going to tell you, if you talk about 40 miles, 72 hours away, I mean, those models are exact. The problem is, we have a major city in the way. If that was, let's say we're talking about anywhere in the continental U.S. in Texas, and you had 40 miles one way or the other with 72 hours notice, if it wasn't Houston, wasn't Corpus Christi, that's a win. And that's where we were with Harvey. The models have really won. We finally have this down to a good science, and 40 miles, I know it makes a huge difference to Miami and Fort Lauderdale and the like, but in the grand scheme of things, 72 hours out, they're almost exactly the same.
Yeah, if people are told to evacuate, they got to evacuate. They got to listen to the authorities. Chad, stand by. We're going to get back to you. As this hurricane is racing toward Florida, officials there are bracing for the worst. Mandatory evacuations have been issued for the Florida Keys, the low-lying parts of Miami-Dade County, as well as Broward County. That's where Fort Lauderdale is. But there are also deep concerns about gas shortages, price gouging, water supplies. CNN's Rosa Flores is joining us now from Miami Beach. Rosa, so what's happening there where you are?
Wolf, there is a lot of worry. There is a lot of stress as residents patch up their homes with pieces of plywood, grab their kids, jump in the car, and then hope for the best as they head north. You talked about price gouging. You talk about gas shortages. That is a huge worry as folks start to see the interstates bumper to bumper heading out of this southern part of Florida. Now, when it comes to evacuations, as you mentioned, Miami-Dade is under a mandatory evacuation for a few areas. Zone A, which is along the coast, multiple areas, including this island that you might see here to my right, which is on the south side. And then there's also the barrier islands where I'm standing right now in Miami Beach. All of these areas, including areas where people live in mobile homes, those under a mandatory evacuation. Our friends to the south in Monroe County, according to the governor, more than 31,000 people have already evacuated, headed north. Our friends to the north in Broward County, anyone living in a low-lying area, anyone living in a mobile home, anyone living east of US 1, which includes Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, Pompano Beach, Deerfield Beach, all of those folks are encouraged and are under mandatory evacuation to leave north, and that is the only way out of this peninsula, Wolf. As you know, you can't go east, you can't go west, you have to go north. Now, when it comes to price gouging, the state attorney here in Miami-Dade County has activated a hotline for people to report price gouging because, of course, in these dire times, there's always people who are going to try to take advantage of others. And the message from Florida is don't do it because you're going to get caught and you're going to get punished. Wolf?
All right, Rosa, stand by over there. Rosa Flores at Miami Beach for us under evacuation orders, at least big chunks of it. The Florida Governor, Rick Scott, says getting enough fuel into his state is one of his top priorities right now. He's joining us live. Governor, I know you're very busy. Thanks very much for joining us, updating our viewers. So first of all, on this issue of fuel, which is so sensitive, people are lining up in long lines to get gas for their cars. What are you able to do about that?
Well, last night I had a call with the retailers, the gas stations, to say, what could I do? This morning I did the major oil companies, and then I've done the carriers that take the fuel from basically our ports to their, say, what can I do? So now what we're doing is we're providing escorts to the carriers so they can get in and out fast. They can get to the stations, they can get back to get more gas from the ports as fast as we can. We're working to make sure that as many vessels can get into our ports as possible, so we have as much fuel as possible. We are getting some waivers of some federal regulations. I talked to Scott Pruitt this morning. EPA just got us some waivers to allow us to have more fuel in the state. We are working on getting some more. The oil companies are helping us try to get some more ships in. Unfortunately, Port Everglades is in Fort Lauderdale will close because of the hurricane. Hopefully, Port Tampa won't. So we're getting more ships into Port Tampa right now. So we're doing everything we can. It has to be frustrating because there are lines, there are some outages, but it's not widespread. It's not everywhere right now. So we're going to do everything we can. We're keeping our evacuation routes open. I do ask, evacuate if you're asked to evacuate. Listen to your local officials. Every county is a little bit different. The topography is a little bit different. Listen to them about evacuation orders. Don't wait, because the longer you wait, if you wait till the storm, we can't take care of you. So we're working hard. We're working with FEMA to solve all these problems. And so I pray for every citizen in my state. I don't want anybody to lose their life. I tell everybody, I'm sure you love your house. I want you to stay alive. I can help rebuild your house. I want you and your family to stay alive. We all love our families.
We certainly do. At what point, Governor, do you make those interstates all one way heading north, for example? We see the traffic is enormous heading north, not much traffic heading south. At what point do you make that decision to move all those lanes in the same direction?
So what we do first, Wolf, is we're tracking this everywhere. Highway Patrol, the Department of Transportation, we have cameras all around the state. We have law enforcement pushing. The first thing we do is we add the shoulder. And so we've got to keep everybody safe. It depends on how fast the traffic is going, because we've got to keep everybody safe first. We'll do everything we can to make sure people are able to evacuate. I tell people, if there's any reason you're in an evacuation zone and you don't have the gas, you can't get out, we have a statewide hotline, and we will get you out. I've told that with the keys that already have their mandatory evacuation. I've told that every place around the state, we will get you out, but you cannot wait. You cannot wait to get out. I'm also looking for more volunteers. I total of 17,000 volunteers. I have a little less than 10,000 people signed up now to volunteer for our shelters, for food distribution. I need more volunteers. You can go to volunteerflorida.org and volunteer. But right now, my goal is to keep everybody safe.
Yeah, well, that's critically important. Chad Myers, our meteorologist, Governor, has a question for you. Chad, go ahead.
Governor, hello. We met in Pensacola last year with the flood there. We both witnessed how much water can damage a neighborhood. Well, this isn't a neighborhood. This is a city. What if Miami gets a 15-foot storm surge, Fort Lauderdale, all the way up into Broward County? What does the city look like with 15 feet of water in it?
Oh, here's what people are not thinking about. This is bigger in size, much bigger than Andrew. Andrew was, a horrible storm. It's it packs more wind, but the real difference is the risk of storm surge. The storm surge can come in. It can come in a long way, and it can cover your house. So you have got to listen. The National Hurricane Center has some storm surge models now. We're using those models county by county. That's part of how they decide an evacuation route, evacuation areas. So you've got to listen. If they tell you that your area should be evacuated, one thing they're thinking about is how big will the storm surge be? The other thing I'm trying to get people to understand is it looks great right now that everybody sort of believes the path is going to be up the East Coast. The cone's not just on the East Coast. The cone's partially on the West Coast. So all the southern part of the state has to continue to watch out for this thing. If there's a little wobble to the west, it impacts the west part of our state. So we're focused on this, but this storm surge is my biggest concern right now besides the fuel. That people don't understand the risk of this storm surge.
Wolf.
Governor, there's two nuclear power plants, as you know, in your state right now, potentially in very, very serious danger. What are you doing to make sure that they are not in danger?
I've been talking to Florida Power Light, which owns these. They will both be shut down. It's about a 30-hour process. They'll start the shutdown as soon as the Category 1 winds start. We're working to make sure we have evacuation routes open for people to get out and get back to them. But they will be completely shut down before the storm hits, and then they will not reopen until afterward. So they are both in a place where their power that they need to restart and to make sure it's safe is high. So I've been talking to Florida Power and Light, and they're very comfortable right now that even with the winds, even with the storm surge, both of these plants will be safe.
One final question. I know you got to run, Governor, before I let you go. Which model do you suspect is more accurate? The European model, which shows a direct hit on Miami and the millions of people in Miami-Dade County and Broward County and Palm Beach County, or the American model, which has this hurricane hitting slightly off the coast, the eastern coast of Florida?
Well, as you know, look, I'm an optimist. I hope it continues. I hope it goes far east and doesn't get any closer than Matthew did last year. But here's what I'm telling everybody. I love my state. I love every citizen here, every visitor. I want everybody to be safe. So don't take a chance. Don't be an optimist with this. Be prepared. Maybe we'll get lucky and it'll go further east, but it could just as well go west.
Well, we're going to be in very close touch with you, Governor Rick Scott of Florida. Good luck to you. Good luck to all the wonderful people down in your beautiful state of Florida. We're hoping for the best. But as you are reminding everyone has to prepare for the worst. And if you want to volunteer to help out the governor, you heard what he had to say. Governor Rick Scott will stay in very close touch with you. Chad, we're about to get more tape any moment now from the President of the United States. He's over at the White House meeting with the Emir of Kuwait, but also speaking about Hurricane Irma. The picture that the governor just presented is very bleak.
It is, and I think it's very important. He said, don't be an optimist. I mean, we have seen so many times, and I admit, hey, it's going to hit, and then it turns right or it turns left. Oh, it's not going to hit this time.
There is going to be damage, whether it's left, right, middle, or center.
The president's speaking
and then eventually this thing gets
in.
all the way up into the Carolinas, and then we're expecting landfall there as still possibly a major hurricane. So not over. Someone's going to get hit. There's going to be damage. You have to keep watching it and make the right decisions.
Chad, at this point, with what you're looking at in this new in this new track that just came in, at this point, is there any chance left that the storm could veer off and head back into the Atlantic, sparing a direct hit on Florida?
Sparing a direct hit at Florida, yes. Sparing a direct hit at the U.S., no. Because when it gets farther to the north, and I'll try to get around here one more time, when the storm finally, if it does miss Florida, if it misses South Florida, the models are absolutely all of them will turn it back to the left. And so you're going to get it here if you don't get it here. So do we, I mean, it depends on where, are you looking here? Are you living
potentially
here? Because
right in Miami-Dade
it will be a
County and then millions
We're
more
talking still tens of billions of dollars
in Broward and Palm Beach counties. That's the worst case scenario. That is clearly what they're bracing for.
Sure. No question, Wolf. if the storm runs up through Key Largo, up Card Sound Road, into Homestead, and into Miami. That's the worst possible scenario. Onshore flow, making significant flooding that the governor was talking about. I think the surge is 15 feet. He thinks is closer to 10. I guess he's being the optimist compared to me being the pessimist or somewhere in between. I want you away from that water. You need to be away from that water. Northern Central Keys, Middle Keys, you got to get out of there. There's no reason to stay there if the water goes over your island. And then finally, back to the north. I just talked to a guy on Twitter, Ryan Maui. He's a doctor, and he said that, look, he looked at the models and he looked at the population. And 16 million people will have wind over 75 miles per hour. That means 8 million people won't have power? I mean, that's got to be close.
Yeah. It's an awful, awful situation. Stand by. We've got a lot more coming up. The brand new forecast from the European model coming in very soon. We'll update you on that.
Maybe if it does hit South Florida with the vengeance.
We'll also speak live with the mayor of
Miami with such elevation, which is like 10 or 12 feet, with a 20-foot storm surge. You knock almost everything down within 2 miles of the coast. That's just a tremendous amount of damage. Now, if you miss the coast, you're still about 160 miles per hour because you're in the water. You're not over land, so you're not decaying the storm. And then it comes up here, and you can see there's not a model that doesn't turn it left. We know it's going to eventually go left. It could stay along the coast the entire way, just like Matthew, and then turn left eventually here around Savannah, but it wouldn't be as strong because it would be interacting with the land longer. If it's in the water, it's going to stay stronger longer.
Still no good, and it's still coming our way. That's basic news we have right now. Chad, great to see you. Still a category.
Look, it's holding steady with 180 mile per hour winds. Now, there are some things we're very confident of, other things not as confident. All right, we're confident Irma is going to continue to the west-northwest. We're also confident that this front, you see right there, is going to deflect it to the north. We are not confident how much. Now, that's key, because if you zoom in tight on this storm, it is so much about where the eye of the storm goes. See this little bright yellow color in there? Those are the peak winds. They only extend 15 miles, 15 miles from the eye. That's where you find the 180 mile per hour winds. So if you take a look at the track of the storm, the National Hurricane Center says, all right, here it comes to the west-northwest. Then they say, yep, it's making that turn to the north. But where? Anywhere in this shaded area is a possibility. If the European model is right, and they are forecasting the worst situation for Miami, they see a landfall with the eye right on shore. That puts what would be 140 mile per hour winds right on shore. If they're off by, say, 20 miles, it keeps the big winds offshore. Yes, hurricane force onshore, but 75 or greater, not 140 at that point in time. If they're 50 miles off, it keeps all of the hurricane force winds offshore, and we'd have tropical storm force winds onshore. Again, a lot of speculation here. We keep an eye on this one closely. Charlie?
Thanks, Lonnie. I'll be here in the next couple of hours and then into some very warm water near the Bahamas. And that's why they're evacuating those Bahama Islands. And here is the latest cone. I'll get a new cone in about 55 minutes or so. But the cone still has landfall in South Florida. And this is the problem. There's still a chance that it goes on this side of the cone, probably 5% over here. There's still a 5% chance that it's on this side of the cone. But there is at least a 60% chance that we're somewhere in the middle. And the middle ends up being South Florida, Miami-Dade, and the like. Here are the computer models. We talk about them all the time. Just to the east of Miami for the American model and the European model right over Isla Mirada. Here is how the European model and the GFS, the American model, differ. Here's what they look like now, all the way to Saturday, overnight Saturday, almost Sunday morning, coming straight into Key Largo, Ocean Reef, into Biscayne Bay. This is worst case scenario. Without a doubt, there is no such thing as a worst case scenario than this, except possibly slamming straight in to Miami proper. There's the storm right there. We're going to have so much storm surge water pouring into Miami, pouring into Biscayne Bay, pouring into Fort Lauderdale and all the like. There could be 20 feet of surge. If your house is less than 20 feet above sea level, it's going to be wet. And now we change you and moving on up toward West Palm. Not a lot better for you. Still that storm onshore, pounding wind, 140 miles per hour, tearing up the entire coastline and all the houses. A 140 mile per hour storm is like an EF3 or 2.5 tornado that sits over your house for 30 or 40 minutes. So that's what you have to think about. That's how strong these winds are. Plus